My name is Ethan Carter, and I made a pact that changed my life forever. For a long time, I kept this story to myself, but I think the time has come to tell it. I was always an ordinary guy, invisible to most people. I grew up in a small town in rural North Carolina called Hickory Hollow, a peaceful place with narrow streets, old houses, and that typical neighborhood where everyone seems to know each other. My world was a lonely one. I didn't have many friends, nor was I the kind of guy who attracted attention. In high school, I went unnoticed. At work, I just fulfilled my duties without standing out. But there was one thing that always kept me awake at night, the desire for what I could never have. Her, Charlotte Reeves, my neighbor, the woman who inhabited my thoughts in a sickly way. From the first time I saw her, I knew she was different from any other girl in town. Tall, brunette, with intense green eyes and a smile that could take anyone's breath away. She was the kind of woman who would never look twice at someone like me. But even so, she was kind to me. She always greeted me with a smile when we bumped into each other on the street, asked how I was doing, and even lent me sugar once. Small gestures that, to anyone else, might not mean anything, but to me, they meant everything. The problem was that Charlotte was in love with another man, Ryan Holloway. Ryan was the exact opposite of me. Rich, charismatic, athletic, and owner of a successful business in town, he was the kind of guy who walked into a room and all eyes turned to him. Charlotte loved him, and he had her without having to make an effort. And I hated that. Charlotte was perfect, but Ryan didn't deserve her. He didn't treat her the way I would have. He didn't see how special she was. And yet every night when I looked out my window, I saw the two of them together. He had everything I wanted. I should never have let myself be carried away by that desire, but I couldn't help it. My room was on the second floor of my parents' house, and my window had a direct view of Charlotte's room. I knew it was wrong, but there was something addictive about seeing her there, alone, when she thought no one was looking. Until one night, I had a strange dream. I was lying in my bed, motionless, and Charlotte appeared beside it. Her hair was loose, falling over her shoulders. She smiled, leaned close to my ear and whispered, "Keep watching me tonight. I want you to see everything." I woke up with a start, my heart racing. The room was dark and silent. The dream seemed so real that I could still smell her perfume in the air. I took it as a sign. I walked to my window and peeked into her room. The lights were off, but the curtain was ajar. I couldn't see clearly, but I knew she was in there, with him. I waited. And then it happened. The lights came on, revealing Charlotte and Ryan kissing. Soon, clothes began to be removed. My chest tightened with jealousy and desire. She wasn't as innocent as she pretended to be. At that moment, I knew I needed to have her for myself. The obsession grew with each passing day. I knew I would never have Charlotte in the conventional way, so I started thinking about alternatives. I remembered my grandmother. She used to tell stories about the supernatural, about pacts, entities, and how the devil always answered those who called on him. "Never play with those things, Ethan," she warned me when I was a child. "The devil may take his time, but he always answers." That night I sat on my bed, closed my eyes, and began to whisper a name that I didn't even know where it came from. A name that seemed to have been placed in my mind by some invisible force. "Veni ad me, veni ad me. Come to me," I called. And I kept calling. At first, nothing happened, but I am a patient man. I continued for days, weeks, and then, finally, he appeared. On the night he appeared, the silence in my room was so heavy that I could hear every beat of my heart. The light bulb flickered twice before burning out completely. The only glow came from the street lamp, projecting unsettling shadows on the walls. I sat on the bed, feeling an unusual cold spread throughout the room. That's when the noise started. In the corner of the room near the wardrobe, a low guttural sound, almost like a growl. My eyes widened. Something was there, I could feel it. And then I saw the movement. Something small, a nimble shadow running across the floor. A black cat. But I knew it shouldn't be there. My house had no animals. The creature stopped near my bed and stared at me. Its eyes glowed in the wrong way, an intense red reflection within the darkness. A chill went up my spine. I should have ignored it. I should have run, but I was no longer my own master. I knelt on the floor and reached out my hand. What? What are you? Before I could do anything, the cat moved. Not like a normal cat. Its body stretched, bent and contorted into something that defied logic. Bones broke and cracked, growing as the dark skin tore. In a matter of seconds, it was no longer a cat, but a man, tall, skeletal, wearing a black suit that seemed to be made of shadows. And worst of all, he had no face. Just a dark blur where the eyes, nose and mouth should have been. But somehow he was smiling. The smell of sulfur and burnt flesh filled the room. My lungs burned and my throat closed for a few seconds. I wanted to scream, run, but I was paralyzed. The creature tilted its head to the side, and when it spoke, its voice was dry and cold, like the crackling of wood burning in a fire. You called me, and I came. That was the scariest thing I had ever heard. My grandmother was right. The devil always answers. I wanted to run away, but something kept me there. The desire, the sick desire for Charlotte. I swallowed hard and tried to sound brave. I want Charlotte. I want her to be mine. The thing was silent, and then it let out a low, distorted laugh, as if echoing from within hell itself. Banal desire, but I accept. He extended his skeletal hand to me. His fingers were too long. The nails looked like claws. But everything has a price, Ethan. Always does. I knew what he wanted. My soul. But at that moment I didn't care. I took his hand. It was like diving into ice. The pain came instantly, burning my skin. My little finger was pierced by something sharp. I let out an involuntary scream, feeling the blood run down. The being laughed again. It is done. Charlotte will be yours, but one day I will come back to collect. And then he disappeared, as if he had never been there. But the hole in my finger was still there, and so was the pain. I threw myself on the bed, my mind spinning. What had I just done? Deep down I knew. I had sold my soul to get the only thing I had ever wanted. Now, I just needed to wait. And then, things started to change. In the days that followed, everything remained the same. Charlotte was still mourning, devastated by the death of her boyfriend Tyler. She avoided leaving the house, and when she did, her face was pale and swollen from crying so much. I tried to get closer to her, offer comfort, but she barely noticed me. That irritated me. I had made a pact. I had given my soul. And yet nothing changed. But then, things started to happen. Small coincidences at first. I received a promotion at work. Out of the blue, my boss, who never liked me, said he had a strange feeling that I deserved a better position. Now I earned twice as much as before. And then came the tragedy. I was leaving home one morning when I saw a strange commotion on the street. Ambulances, sirens flashing. The neighborhood gathered near the crosswalk. Something bad had happened. I approached, my heart pounding. And then I saw Tyler. His body was lying on the asphalt, a trail of blood running down the street. He had been run over by a bus, stone cold dead. My throat went dry. An icy shiver ran down my spine. The creature had fulfilled its part. I should have felt guilty, but strangely, I felt nothing. The only thing that came to mind was, now Charlotte is vulnerable, and I knew exactly how to approach her. In the days that followed, Charlotte fell into depression. She locked herself in her house. She only left to go to church. And that's when I had an idea. If Tyler was a man of faith, then I would become one too. I dressed in more discreet clothes. I started attending church services. I made friends with her friends. I even offered to help her with everyday tasks. At first, she barely spoke to me, but over time, something changed. She began to trust me, and I knew I was on the right track. Gradually, my presence became a constant in her life. I was the shoulder to cry on, the person she leaned on, and one day, it happened. We were sitting in her living room drinking tea. She took my hand, her eyes filled with tears. "Ethan, I don't know what I would do without you." My heart raced. It was working. She was falling into my web, but there was something wrong. Something was watching me. That night, as I walked home, I felt a strange weight in the air, as if the world were different. And then I saw the silhouette standing on the corner of my street. Tall, thin, dressed in black, faceless. My blood ran cold. The demon was there, and he was smiling. Since that night, things have changed. At first, it was just sensations. I felt that something was watching me all the time, as if there were invisible eyes glued to me. But as the days passed, the terror took shape. On the first night, I woke up with a weight on my chest, a suffocating sensation, as if someone was pressing me against the mattress. I tried to move, but I couldn't. That's when I saw it, in the corner of my room, the dark silhouette, tall, thin, motionless, the demon. He didn't say anything, he just watched me. And then he smiled. His mouth widened in an unnatural way. Thin, pointed teeth stood out in the dark. My heart almost exploded. I blinked and he disappeared. The light from the street lamp came through the window, revealing that the room was empty. Was it a dream? Maybe. But then things got worse. Nightmares. They came every night. In the first one, I was at Charlotte's house, but it wasn't the Charlotte I knew. Her eyes were white, empty. Her skin as pale as a corpse. She looked at me and said, "He's coming." And then blood started to run from her eyes. I tried to run, but my feet were stuck to the floor, and in the background he appeared. The same being, the same smile. I woke up in a cold sweat. That wasn't just a dream. The next morning, something really scary happened. I was in the bathroom brushing my teeth when I noticed something strange in the mirror. A black blur standing behind me. The reflection was staring at me. But I was alone. I turned around quickly, but there was nothing there. When I looked at the mirror again, I saw something that almost made me fall backwards. On the glass, written in a reddish tone, were the words, "I'm watching you." My stomach churned. This was no longer a game. The price of the pact was beginning to be collected. In the days that followed, everything crumbled. I didn't sleep anymore. When I managed to close my eyes for a few minutes, it was as if something crawled into my mind. They were always the same dreams. He was there, watching me, smiling. But this time he spoke. "You belong to me, Ethan." I would wake up gasping, my chest aching. The room became icy, as if someone had opened a hole to hell. Things were moving on their own. The cabinet slammed in the early morning. Objects fell from the shelves without explanation. The TV turned on by itself, always to the same hissing static. And then the voices began. That night, I was alone at home. My mother had gone to visit my aunt. My younger sister was sleeping in the next room. That's when I heard it. Whispers, low, weak, as if someone was speaking inside the walls. I got up and followed the sound. It was coming from my sister's room. My blood ran cold. I opened the door slowly. She was there, sleeping soundly, but the whispers continued inside the room. And then I saw. In the corner of the room, among the shadows, 2 long hands were coming out from under the bed. Thin fingers, huge nails scratching the floor. I stopped breathing. The thing began to crawl out. It was him, the same being that had been haunting me. His eyes were two black, deep caverns. The wide smile opened. Jagged teeth like blades gleamed in the darkness. I tried to scream, but I couldn't move. And then he whispered my name. Ethan. The lamp flickered violently, and when the light returned to normal, he was no longer there. My sister continued sleeping, as if nothing had happened. But on the floor, next to her bed, there were deep scratch marks. That was a warning. The next day I went to Charlotte. I needed to talk to someone. When she opened the door, I must have been as pale as a ghost. Ethan, what happened? I was going to answer, but before I said anything, the door of her house slammed shut on its own. Charlotte turned white. Did you see that? I asked in a trembling voice. She nodded slowly. Ethan, what did you do? Charlotte made me sit on the sofa. Ethan, you need to tell me everything. My eyes were red. The dark circles were sunken. I hadn't slept in days. He wouldn't let me. I didn't want to say anything. But when I looked around the room, I saw a dark silhouette in the reflection of the turned-off TV, standing behind me, watching. I squinted, but it didn't help. He was there, and he would always be. Ethan, please. Charlotte touched my hand. Her house was warm, but my body was freezing. I made a pact. My voice came out hoarse. Charlotte didn't react. She turned pale. She lowered her head. You called him? My spine tingled. You know about this? Charlotte took a deep breath. Ethan, I shouldn't tell you this, but my grandmother, she has seen this thing before. The story she told me made me want to throw up. In the 70s, a girl named Lillian made a similar pact. She wanted money, she wanted power, but what she got was a death sentence. In the first months, everything seemed like a dream, but then the whispers began. She said that in the early morning someone spoke inside her head, calling her name louder and louder, and then the symbols began to appear, on the wall, on the ceiling, on the bathroom mirror, scratch marks. Until one day, Lillian simply disappeared. The police never found the body. The only thing that remained was the mirror in her room, covered in marks as if something had come out from inside it. Charlotte took a deep breath. My grandmother said that this entity takes those who made the pact, but before, he has fun with the victim. I was dizzy. The air became heavy. I felt that he was there. Ethan. Charlotte held me by the shoulders. We need to break this pact. I wanted to believe it. I wanted to have hope. But then, her phone rang. She answered it. Hello. And I heard it. A laugh, low, icy, coming from the other end of the line. Charlotte's eyes filled with terror. She looked at me, and then the call dropped. But the phone kept ringing. The phone kept ringing. Charlotte held it in her hand, trembling. This doesn't make sense. The call dropped. I knew what was happening. He was playing with us. The sound of the phone got louder, deafening, and then it stopped. Charlotte took a deep breath and looked at me. Ethan, this is getting worse. She put the phone on the coffee table and held my hand tightly. We need to end this. Now. I just nodded. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't be that simple. Charlotte insisted that we should seek help. She believed that there was a way to break the pact, a way to get rid of the thing that was chasing me. I wanted to believe that. But deep down, I knew there was no escape. There was no way to run from something that was already inside me. The nights got worse. The demon wasn't just watching me now. He whispered things I didn't want to hear. Charlotte is not yours, Ethan. Never was. Never will be. I covered my ears, tried to ignore it, but the words were inside my head. And then Charlotte began to change. At first it was just details, small forgetfulness, a distant expression in her eyes. Then came the strange questions. Have you ever dreamed that you were in another place, Ethan? What do you mean? That you weren't you, that you were living a life that wasn't yours? I didn't know what to answer, until one night something happened. I was lying down, almost asleep, when I felt the mattress sink beside me. My heart froze. I knew I was alone, but when I turned around, Charlotte was there, or something that looked like Charlotte. Her eyes were completely black, without pupils, without emotion. She smiled. Ethan, have you paid the price yet? Before I could react, her mouth opened in the wrong way, stretching beyond what was human. And then, everything went black. Now I'm here, alone, in the dark, waiting. I don't know how much time has passed. Days, weeks. All I see is him, always standing there in the corner of the room, smiling, waiting. Sometimes I think I hear Charlotte calling my name from outside, but I'm not sure. I don't even know if I'm Ethan Carter anymore, if I'm still alive, or if I've already been taken long ago. I only know one thing. If you're thinking about making a pact, don't do it, because the devil always collects his debt, and maybe, just maybe, he's already come for you.